So, we've seen some of the footage of police interactions with model Hamas protesters from Columbia to UCLA. Got more than a little chippy. And one mom of a Jewish young man who attends UCLA is concerned about her son's safety on campus, so she called the administration to make sure that her son was being protected.
Good.
And this is how that exchange went.
I'm trying to report my kid is not able to get into the library. They are bombarding him and not allowing him to get into the library, citing the need for some wristbands. Did UCLA issue wristbands to people?
I don't have any information on that if they did.
Okay, so what should he do? Because he can't enter the library, he can't enter his classes.
So whoever he's speaking to right there that's saying that they need wristbands, is he not able to ask them any information?
They said because he's Jewish, he cannot enter that area and that they won't issue him a wristband.
So that wasn't a university thing. That's probably the protesters that are out there.
Right. So are the protesters allowed to not allow a student who pays tuition access to their class in the library?
No, they're not allowed, but unfortunately they have kind of taken over that little area right there. But is there any other entrance that your son can enter through?
No, they are barricading every area for him to get into. And with all due respect, why is that even tolerated? Like, why should a Jewish kid have to go to another entrance?
It's not, I don't know if I'm going to say it's tolerated, but unfortunately the police are not intervening with that right now. And this is coming from the university, so if you had any questions or concern, you would take it with the university itself.
So the university has taken a stance that they will not, in fact, allow or help Jewish students get to their classes, that this is going to be tolerated.
We've received a directive to not intervene at this time, yes.
And what is...
Yeah, right. That's the administration's policy. Do you ever hear the saying, customer's always right?
Yes.
It's like whammy burger. It's like, yeah, well, that's not our policy. Do you ever hear the saying that Jewish students should be allowed in the library? And if somebody seizes part of your campus, you should have them unseized. That's not our policy.
I mean, what if he was black and they weren't letting him in because he was black? The NBA would stop their finals right now. The Biden would call in the National Guard. I mean, it's so sick. If he's a white student, she should have asked him, well, if my son wasn't Jewish, would he be allowed to go in?
As long as he supports the genocide of the Jews, then he can come into the library. Joanna Williams joins us. She's a spy columnist, founder of CIEO, and author of How Woke Won, the Elitist Movement That Threatens Democracy, Tolerance, and Reason. That's a timely book and title because, of course, we've seen this for the last 2 weeks all over these elite, quote-unquote, universities. Joanna Williams, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So how about that? I mean, I appreciate campus police's honesty with that Jewish mom. Yeah, that's they just have taken over the campus, and we're told by the administration to stand down, and police aren't doing anything either. I mean, ultimately, LAPD did intercede there, but, law and order as a last resort.
No, this is absolutely awful. I mean, it's unbelievable to think that this is happening now. There was another political era where Jewish people were kept out of buildings and segregation occurred in this particular way. And we had an entire generation of young men who lost their lives and people who died fighting against the Nazis. Now we seem to have reached a stage where we roll over and let this situation, this segregation, singling out of Jewish students take place. And unfortunately, it seems like a large number of people who are in charge of our institutions are quite relaxed about this, are quite happy for this to take place. I think it's utterly shocking and abhorrent.
Well, and you know, it's gotten enough attention and enough sort of general repudiation that President Biden finally felt compelled to address this with a pro forma statement yesterday. But it's always interesting to see how the left projects their conduct onto their target and euphemizes what they're actually doing. You see this all the time. These are not anti-Semitic bedwetters. These are anti-war protesters. They're just protesting war. They want war to stop. They're just pro-ceasefire. Pay no attention to the, anti-Israel's right to exist, pro-October 7th chants and rhetoric and haikus and so forth. But just the way that they try to use rhetorical artifice to recharacterize what's actually happening. And I guess because they're in charge of all these places and a lot of halls of power, in addition to formal halls of power, in addition to cultural ones, I guess it works in the West.
Well, it does. And I think what you illustrate is the fact that there's two different things almost going on here in unison. On the one hand, you've got these out of control students who are having essentially a temper tantrum on campus, a fit of hysteria and anti-Semitic rage playing out in these leafy university campuses. But then you've got something else going on as well, which is an entire layer of bureaucrats, journalists, commentators, a real kind of elite, cultural elite, who are essentially condoning and kind of covering for their actions, not condemning or calling out what they're doing, but actually making excuses for them. And I think this idea that this is just like 1968 all over again, this is just hippie, peaceful protests, I think that's absolute rubbish. I mean, there's such clear distinctions. First of all, 1968, these were anti-war protests. These were peace protests, whereas it seems to me that what these students are calling for actually is not a ceasefire at all, but the erasure of Israel. They want the war to continue. They just don't want Israel to be victorious. They want Hamas to be victorious. So it's the opposite of peace that they're calling for. Also, when you look at the 1960s, there were clearly protests against racism. It was calling for the end of racial segregation. Now, these protests are, again, doing the opposite of that. They're enforcing racial segregation, only singling out Jewish students rather than black students.
Well, speaking of making excuses for people, I want you to hear this. This is Professor Graham Blair. He's at UCLA. And they were talking, 200 people were arrested yesterday. The place was completely trashed, garbage everywhere, graffiti all over one of their beautiful halls. And he said, don't worry about that.
I think anyone who is worried about graffiti on buildings on a college campus needs to come visit a college campus. It's 18-year-olds who are learning for the first time how to express themselves.
My police.
They just learn how to speak.
Right. Yeah. They're little babies. So we've had 2,000 people across the nation arrested here. Madison, Wisconsin, they took the tents down. They've since put them back up. Has there been any unrest like this or similar to this in Europe at college campuses
yes.
there?
There has. We've had a recent spate of camps being set up suddenly here in the UK and across other countries. Here, a university in Paris today has closed down its lessons before the end of term. There's no more teaching going to be taking place. So this is spreading. This is becoming a global movement. But I mean, just on the clip you played there about, these are just teenagers expressing themselves, I think that's the most disgusting way of excusing their behavior. I mean, I'm mum to an 18-year-old, a 22-year-old and a 25-year-old. I brought up my children to know that it's not appropriate to be dropping litter and writing on walls, beyond the age of 3 or 4, never mind 18. Right. It's disgusting the way excuses are being made for these students. And I think, it is a difficult situation to tread, because I do believe in free speech, but I think it's possible to say that people should have a right to protest whilst at the same time condemning their action, condemning the cause that they're espousing. They are completely wrong in what they're advocating for, but we should tolerate their right to protest. Unfortunately, what's happening is completely the opposite of this. You've got people making excuses for the cause and actually supporting them every step of the way. Oh, this is just peace, this is just creative expression. And then you've got this police crackdown, which unfortunately I think is just having the effect of making these protests spread further.
Yeah, but that should come as no surprise to us. We've seen this play out over and over and over again in Chicago. We have a mayor who calls young violent offenders kids being silly. That's the phrase that's used. Kids being silly when they go on wildings or they assault people, or worse. Kids are rambunctious and they're silly. We saw this during the summer of Black Lives Matter when looting was called symbolic taking. So, I mean, the infantilization and the excuse making for lawlessness is nothing new in the West. But maybe it's getting to a fever pitch. Maybe it is hopefully having more resonance than it has previously, because we seem to express outrage about it and then wait for it to happen again because we've done nothing to address the underlying cultural rot.
I think that's true, and I think the point about infantilization is really well made. But I think also we mustn't forget a political element to this. I think the reason why excuses are being made is because the people, the supposed adults in positions of authority, I think do actually sympathise with the protesters and the demands that they're making. And I think we've got this kind of casual anti-Semitism on the left that's been rampant now for decades, and it's just, it is a very kind of casual, it kind of hides itself as anti-Israel, anti-Zionism, but it really is just anti-Jewish bigotry. So you've got that kind of political excuse making. I think as soon as you see 18, 19-year-olds expressing political views that the woke establishment disagree with, then suddenly that infantilization isn't there anymore.
Right. No, then they're Christian nationalists and threats to our democracy. Yeah. Oh, no, I get it. Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, so the other thing, though, too, is the silence of Western leaders, if not the outright throwing in some places. I mean, the Marxist president of Colombia comes to mind, throwing in with the essentially Hamas and Islamist terrorists in calling for Israel and Netanyahu and others in leadership there to be prosecuted by at The Hague, the International Criminal Court, and Rishi Sunak hasn't said anything about that. And, of course, Joe Biden hasn't said anything about that. But the West should be sending a message to the ICC, it seems to me, that to essentially throw Bibi Netanyahu in and the Israeli government in with those who have committed genocide throughout throughout modern times is absurd. It's not going to be supported by these countries, the United States, Britain, other civilized countries anywhere, any of the continents will take anybody and everybody who wants to be civilized and stand up for good sense here. But very few people are saying that, hey, ICC, don't even think about going down this path.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think what we need to realize is how cowardly our leaders are, and how much, again, they agree, I think, at heart with this casual anti-Semitism that we see. And they do not support Israel's right to exist anymore as in the way that they should do. There might be some rhetorical nods to this being an important to support Israel, but it's not demonstrated in any meaningful sense. But I think the other point about these protest camps there that we're seeing cropping up on universities is just how much of a moral boost that actually does give to Hamas on the ground in Gaza. they see these videos, and there's been some circulating on social media in the past few days of students actually dressed up essentially as Muslims, non-Muslim students. I'm on about, wearing headscarves and veils and essentially Muslim attire, and role-playing as if they are in Gaza and in a Gazan refugee camp themselves. And you just imagine the leaders of Hamas must be rubbing their hands in glee when they see these video clips, just thinking, we don't need to make our case in the West. We've got this kind of army of global students doing our dirty work for us.
Joanna Williams is a spy columnist, founder of CIEO, and author of How Woke Won, the elitist movement that threatens democracy, tolerance, and reason. Joanna, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Hi, this is Pastor Kelvin from Christian Liberty Academy in Arlington Heights. It is time to get your children and grandchildren out of the godless government schools. How can we subject our loved ones to forced, ungodly psychological examinations and perverse sexual teachings? You would not send your child to a school that teaches 2 + 2 is 5. What is being taught today is far worse and damaging to minds and hearts. We can help through our on-campus Christian school and homeschool program. For over 55 years, we have operated a Christian school now in Arlington Heights, and we have